Hello friends, welcome to the HFY Ode, where we bring you new science fiction stories, a new world, a new adventure. And yes, there is no robotic or AI voices here, only real human voices with real human touch. So let's start this journey, and please subscribe my channel if you like the stories and press the bell icon for the latest updates. Let's have a story. Okay.
The human female arrived on station Kethdora with a disciplinary file longer than Vethkael's forearm and a smile that registered on 0 threat assessments. Vethkael had read the file twice. 3 reprimands for insubordination. 1 formal censure for conducting unauthorized medical triage on an alien species during a live-fire exercise. 1 flag. Not a reprimand, a flag, which was in some ways worse, for persistent failure to disengage from non-mission critical personnel. The evaluating officer had written, in the summary field, demonstrates poor threat prioritization and an apparent inability to accept tactical loss. The flag had been open for 2 years. No one had closed it because it kept applying. He had reviewed this file, standing in the docking bay as her transit pod sealed behind her. She walked out carrying a single kit bag with a yellow strip of repair tape across the left shoulder strap. Not her own repair tape. From the look of it, the kind used on atmospheric suits, not personal gear. She was wearing on her bag. For no reason Vethkael could identify. The yellow was very bright. She looked at him. He was the only Savari in the bay, and the Savari were distinctive. Crystalline spines running from crown to mid-back, each one currently angled at the neutral assessment position, faintly refracting the dock lights into pale prismatic lines across the floor. She smiled at him the same way she had smiled at the bay door, which was to say the smile did not shift between an empty door and a being capable of independent evaluation. "You must be my escort," she said. "I am Station Intelligence Officer Vethkael," he said. "I am conducting your intake assessment." "Right," she said. "Ehedgerika." She held out her hand. He knew the human greeting gesture. He did not take her hand because the Savari did not practice contact greeting with unknowns. She did not appear offended. She just put her hand down and kept walking, and he fell in a step beside her, and that was the first thing she did that his file on her had not predicted. She did not wait for him to lead. The Vrethian scouts hit the outer ring 6 hours after her arrival. The alarm was not a surprise. Vethkael had been tracking a Vrethian forward patrol for 11 cycles. What was a surprise was the speed of the breach. 3 points simultaneously, the northeast docking collar, the atmospheric processing hub, and sublevel 4, which suggested the scouts had been inside the perimeter before the alarm triggered, which meant either a sensor failure or an intelligence failure, and Vethkael was already pulling logs when Commander Ossie's voice came over the garrison channel. All non-essential personnel to secure positions. Repeat, non-essential to secure. Combat designation units respond to breach points as assigned. Ehedgerika was non-essential. She had no combat designation on Kethdora. She had arrived 6 hours ago with a flag file and a kit bag. Vethkael was already moving toward the tactical center when his sensor strip, a chemical receptor band worn at the wrist, registered the faint ammoniac trace that meant a Savari stress response nearby. He turned. 2 garrison soldiers, both Savari, had frozen in the corridor outside sublevel 4. Their spines were fully erect, angled back. Maximum threat display, which in their species also indicated the neurological lock that preceded flight. They were staring at the breach indicator on the sublevel door. Ehedgerika was running toward them, not toward the tactical center, toward the breach point. She was not in armor. She had her kit bag over one shoulder, and she was running at a door that had a pressure differential indicator blinking red and 2 fully combat-loaded Savari soldiers standing frozen in front of it. Vethkael stopped. She hit the wall beside the door at a controlled sprint, dropped the kit bag, and had the manual seal lever in her hands before the bag stopped sliding. She looked at the 2 frozen Savari. "I need your weight on the secondary brace there." She pointed. The angle she was indicating was not the obvious one. It was correct. The secondary brace on a sublevel door was load-bearing in the way most people did not know unless they had read the station schematics. which Ehedrika had been on the station for 6 hours. Neither Savari moved. Now, she said, not loudly, just with a texture that was not a request. One of them moved, then the other. She talked them through the brace positions while she worked the lever, and the breech light held red for 7 seconds, and then went amber, and then went out. She stood up. There was a dark mark on her jacket where the door frame had caught her. She'd been pressed into the frame as a brace herself, using her body as the third anchor point. She looked at the door for a moment. Then, she picked up her kit bag. Vethkael had not moved. He was standing 30 paces down the corridor, and he had not moved, and his wrist sensor was reading his own ammoniac trace now, faint but measurable, the chemical ghost of something he had no clean word for. Her left pauldron had a patch of yellow repair tape on it. The tape was frayed at the edges. He counted the fraying threads. 4, 5, 6. The sixth was longer than the others. She had not been ordered to do this. She had been ordered not to. Commander Ossie's channel had been explicit, non-essential to secure positions. Vethkael opened a new file. In the subject field, he typed, Ehedrika, Incident 1. In the classification field, he reached for the standard Savari behavioral taxonomy, and found nothing that fit. He typed irrational aggression and save the draft. He did not close it. Something kept the field open. He told himself it was procedural habit and moved toward the tactical center and did not look back at the patch of yellow on her bag, which was still very bright in the corridor lighting. The entry stayed open. That night, running assessments in the tactical center, he returned to it 4 times. He did not add anything. He did not close it. He told himself this was also procedural. He did not believe himself, which was new. Ehedrika ate something that smelled like Savari nerve toxin and asked if Vethkael wanted some. The lockdown order came at hour 9. All non-combat personnel confined to shared quarters until the breach investigation concluded. Vethkael was assigned to monitor the civilian and auxiliary section. The garrison Savari commander believed he was suited to this because he was technically also non-combat in designation. Intelligence work. Assessment. He did not argue. He took up position in the auxiliary corridor outside quarters 7 through 12 and began running passive scans. Ehedrika was in quarter 9. The door was not sealed. It was never sealed on the station. The auxiliary quarters had no proper locks, a design decision Vethkael had flagged twice in maintenance reports. He stood outside and heard, from within, a sound he could not immediately classify, a rhythmic intermittent percussion accompanied by what his auditory sensors first categorized as a structural stress vocalization, and then recategorized as something else entirely when it repeated with too much variation to be stress-induced. She was singing. He opened the door. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor beside the comm relay panel, which she had pulled from the wall, its interior exposed, 9 leads disconnected in a way that suggested either damage or deliberate disassembly, and she was eating something from a foil packet and singing to herself, and the smell coming off the food was his wrist sensor red, capsaicin compound, mid-level concentration, not immediately lethal to Savari but close to the threshold, and she looked up when he opened the door. "Hey," she said. "Close the door. There's a draft." He came in. He closed the door. The smell was stronger inside. "What is that?" he said, meaning the food. Pyri travel ration." She tilted the packet toward him. "Want some? That compound is cytotoxic to 3 of the 5 registered species on this station." "Is it cytotoxic to you specifically?" He consulted his internal chemical catalog. "Near threshold. So probably no," she said pleasantly, and ate more of it, and went back to the comm relay. Vethkael stood for a moment. He was not sure what he had expected. He moved to the far side of the room and pulled up his assessment interface. He should log her food choice as an environmental hazard in shared quarters. He opened the form. He did not fill it in. He watched her hands on the relay components instead. She was good. Not formally trained good. The reconnection sequence she was using was not standard issue, It was improvised, working around a fried secondary board by routing through the backup in a way that the maintenance manual explicitly cautioned against. But the manual's caution was conservative. The actual tolerances made it viable. She knew that. He was not sure how she knew it, but she did. 9 leads reconnected. She had done 9 in the time it took him to not fill in the food hazard form. There was another being in the room. He had not noticed on entry, a Savari garrison private. One of the soldiers from the sub-level corridor, the younger one, the one who had moved first when a Hedgerika told him to. He was sitting on the far bunk with a wound dressing on his forearm, a Vrethian claw mark, clean but deep, and the dressing was wrong. It was the standard issue wrapping, but the pressure was wrong for Savari vascular anatomy. The wrap that worked on human forearms would cut circulation to a Savari's subdermal spine muscle tissue, which would not kill him, but would cause a specific and miserable kind of nerve pain for approximately 12 cycles. Hedgerika looked at the private, at his arm, back at the relay. She set down her tools, got up, and went to him. She unwrapped his forearm. She redressed it correctly. The modified pressure wrap used by Savari field medics, which was not in the human medical database, and which she should not have known, and the private spines, which had been half elevated in that particular pattern that meant pain being ignored, lowered to neutral. Better, she said. The private said, in Savari, yes. Then, haltingly, in standard, better. She nodded and went back to the relay. Vethkael's spines lowered. He had not been aware they were elevated. His wrist sensor was reading his own chemical output again. Not the ammoniac stress trace this time. Something else. Savari biochemistry had 17 named stress response compounds. There were 3 more that the scientific literature had not yet named because they were so rarely produced that they appeared in the lab record as anomalies. His wrist sensor was detecting an anomaly compound. He looked at the comm relay. The exposed wiring. 9 leads reconnected. She had not asked for permission to fix it. She had not asked if the private needed help. She had done both because the relay was broken and the private was in pain, and those are the facts of the room, and she had simply responded to the facts. He became aware, with a particular quality of discomfort he could not chemically categorize, that he had been standing near the door for several minutes, doing nothing useful while she fixed the room. She turned and looked at him, said nothing, reached into her kit bag, pulled out a ration bar, standard issue, not the toxic one, and held it out toward him. He did not move for a moment. She had known. She had not asked what was wrong. She had not, for that matter, looked at his spine position or his wrist sensor or any of the external markers of Savari distress. She had simply looked at him and known and responded. He crossed the room and took the ration bar. It tasted of nothing in particular. Compressed grain compound, the kind that had been nutritionally correct and palatably inoffensive for the 50 years since humans had started mass-producing field rations for multi-species garrisons. He ate half of it and held the rest. She was back at the relay, singing again. He had been wrong in his first classification. It was not a stress vocalization. He had no correct category for it. He sat down on a near bunk and held the remaining half of the ration bar and did not look for a category. Outside, the station hummed. The breach indicators had gone dark, but not off. 11 cycles until the relief fleet arrived. 11 was a long time. He did not put the wrapper down. Hedgerika found the Vrethian prisoner before anyone else did, which was impossible because the prisoner was inside a sealed maintenance shaft that was not on any map Vethkael had been given. She found him at hour 14, during the breach investigation sweep she had not been assigned to. She had been doing the sweep anyway, working sub-level corridor section by section with a portable Atmos sensor because, she said, when Vethkael caught up to her, the standard sweep missed the maintenance shafts, and the scouts had come through the maintenance shafts, so if any scout had gone aground rather than retreating, they'd be in the maintenance shafts, which no one was checking. You were not assigned to the sweep, Vethkael said. I know, she said. The sweep is a military function. You are flagged as non-essential. Yep. She was moving down the corridor, reading her sensor. Found anything interesting yet? He had been following her for 11 minutes. He had not answered this question once. He was following her because she was conducting an unsanctioned security operation on a station under siege threat. And as the intelligence officer, he had procedural standing to accompany and monitor unauthorized activity. This was the reason. He had told himself this twice and found it adequate on the first telling and less adequate on the second. She stopped at maintenance shaft 7C, which was not on any posted map, which he knew because he had memorized every posted map, and this one was not on them. She ran her sensor over the access panel. The reading she showed him had a life sign signature, small, cold, faint. Vrithian metabolic register under suppression. Wounded, she said. Hiding. The regulation was clear. Contained hostile in an uncontrolled space. Notify command, seal access points. Await armed response or issue termination order pending tactical assessment. She opened the panel. Vethkel said, Ehedrika. He's wounded, she said. He's not going anywhere. The Vrithian was in the back of the shaft, curled in the posture his species adopted under mortal threat. Limbs drawn in, secondary carapace folded over vitals, eye clusters shut. He was about a quarter of standard Vrithian mass, which meant young, probably a first deployment scout. There was a wound along his left flank from something that had not cauterized properly. Veth-KL could see the dried hemolymph matted into the carapace joints from 2 meters away. Ehedrika climbed into the shaft. The Vrithian registered her movement, and his carapace opened, defensive threat posture, and the limb that functioned as a forelimb snapped out, and Vethkal said Ehedrika again, and she said very quietly, I see him. She kept moving, not at the Vrithian directly, at an oblique angle, keeping her hands visible, moving slowly and without the predator cue of direct approach. She was using approach signals. Veth-KL species used them when handling wounded fauna in the field. He had not known humans use them. He was not certain she knew she was using them. She sat down beside the Vrithian, reached into her kit bag, pulled out the field dressing kit that Savari regulations listed as for registered medical personnel only, which she was not. The Vrithian bit her. Not a full bite, a warning bite, the Vrithian equivalent of a slap, delivered to the back of her hand. It broke the skin. She made a sound, not pain vocalization, something shorter, sharper, and then was still. The Vrithian had the bite reflex, still engaged, primary mandibles at medium extension. Waiting. She waited too. The Vrithian held for 12 seconds. It is difficult to convey what 12 seconds of absolute stillness means to a Savari intelligence officer standing outside a maintenance shaft with his spines fully erect and his anomaly chemical compound registering at twice the previous concentration. Savari Threat Assessment Protocol said 12 seconds of unresolved hostile contact in confined space. Abort approach, seal shaft, call an armed response. She resumed bandaging. You're scared, she said. I get it. The Vrithian did not respond. Its mandibles were at half extension now. She kept working. Her hands were steady. The bite wound on her right hand was bleeding into the field dressing she was applying to the Vrithian's flank, her own blood mixing with his hemolymph in the dressing material, and she either had not noticed this or had not changed her priority assessment. She finished the dressing, set the remaining kit material to the side, within the Vrithian's reach, set her water canteen beside it. The canteen had a dent on the side, left grip shaped, old damage. She stood, slowly, oblique angle retreat, same non-predator signals, and came back out of the shaft. She looked at Veth-KL. Close it back up, she said. Don't seal it. He did not move. The Savari language had Thesavor, the mercy kill of an injured enemy, offered to end suffering. He had used the word 3 times in his career. Every species in the Galactic Compact had an equivalent term. When he had studied xenolinguistics in his first posting, he had cataloged them as a cross-species constant, the acknowledgement that enemies were still beings, and that pain did not require a political valence. But Thesavor was a death. His language had no word for what she had just done, for healing an enemy, for leaving water. He stood in the maintenance corridor for a long time after she left. The station hummed. The water canteen sat in the shaft beside the wounded Vrithian who was not dead, who was, according to the faint life sign signature on the sensor, alive, and the readings were ambiguous, but his professional read of Vrithian biometric data said, less afraid than before. He filed no report. In 17 years of service with the Savari Defense Cooperative, he had never broken a reporting regulation. He closed the shaft panel without sealing it and walked back toward the tactical center and did not find anywhere in his species' long and carefully ordered understanding of war a drawer to put this in. The Vrithian siege fleet arrived 17 cycles early, which meant either the enemy's intelligence was better than anyone admitted, or someone on Kethdora had told them exactly when to come. The first strike took out the upper sensor array and the commander's tactical station simultaneously, which was too clean to be coincidence and too fast to be improvised. Whoever had planned to strike Vector had the internal station layout. The explosion that took Commander Aussie came through the ceiling of the tactical center at 0317 station time. Vethkael was 30 meters down the corridor when the blast wave hit. He registered it through the floor plates first. The Savari skeleton was sensitive to subsonic vibration, and then the overpressure, and then the lights went red. He ran toward the tactical center. He was aware this was the wrong direction. He ran anyway and did not examine why until later. The tactical center was destroyed. Commander Aussie was gone. The chain of command beneath her had 3 names: Adjutant Preth, Lieutenant Corsair Wynn, and a human weapons specialist named Volkov who had been on station for 8 months. Preth was not answering his comm, Wynn was alive and pinned under a collapsed conduit, which the garrison soldiers standing around him were looking at without moving because the conduit was against an active power coupling and touching it without insulated equipment would complete a circuit through whoever was touching it. Ehedrika had insulated equipment. She had insulated equipment because she had, at some point in the last 14 hours, gone through the station's emergency equipment locker and restocked her kit bag, which he knew because he had seen her kit bag this morning and it had not had the orange striped insulation gloves hanging from the outer strap. She was already at the conduit. She had already assessed the circuit path. She was already talking to Wynn through the gap, keeping his responses coming, keeping him conscious. She pulled the conduit free in one controlled motion, and 3 garrison soldiers lifted it away, and Wynn came out bleeding from both legs but intact. She stood up. The room was full of smoke. Through the remains of the viewport, Vethkael could see the siege fleet, 17 vessels, Vrithian dreadnought class, arranged in approach formation. His tactical assessment was automatic and took 1.3 seconds. 3-to-1 odds, station shields at 30%, reinforcements estimated at 6 cycles minimum, 0 probability of successful defense by engagement. Savari military doctrine had a formal term for this configuration, Velthran, the moment where continued resistance produces only additional casualties without altering outcome. The rational response to Velthran was negotiation or withdrawal. There was no third option in the doctrine manual. He had read the doctrine manual. He had contributed 3 sections to the most recent edition. Ehedrika looked at the fleet. Okay, she said. She turned to the surviving garrison. 22 beings, 8 species, looking at her, which had happened because she was standing at the front of the room and she had just pulled their lieutenant out of a collapsed conduit, and she was the only person in the room who was looking at the fleet instead of the door. Her voice carried in the silence without effort, not because it was loud, but because everything else had gone quiet. We are not dying today, she said. Shields are 30. We're going to work with that. Volkov, weapons. Start running asymmetric fire patterns. I want them reading us as more than we are. Devi, a small human Vethkael did not recognize, who had appeared from somewhere in the corridor. You know this station's atmosphere systems better than anyone. I need a thermal signature that looks like a second shield layer. Give me anything that'll read as one on their sensors. Everyone else, you have jobs, go do them. No one moved for 3 seconds. Vethkael counted. Then Volkov went to the weapons console. Then Devi went the other way. Then the rest of them moved one after another because the first person had moved and the second had, and it had become somehow a thing that was happening. Veth watched the bloodstain on her shoulder spread. The wound under her pauldron. She had taken a scatter-around fragment somewhere in the blast. He had not seen it happen, was darkening the jacket fabric at the seam. The yellow repair tape on her pauldron was still there. He could see the sixth thread, the long one. She was still giving orders. He had run 17 probability models in his career on odds of 3 to 1 or worse. Savari modeling did not produce solutions below 20% probability of success. The models would not run below that threshold. The software was built that way because below 20% you were not making tactical decisions. You were making thesivore decisions, end of engagement decisions, the kind that were made facing backward toward what you had done rather than forward toward what you would do. He had not run a model. He had not wanted to see the number. She turned, and her eyes found him in the smoke, and she said, "Veth, comms. Everything we have, keep trying for the relief fleet. And see if you can raise any other garrison within range." He went to the comm station. He did not know when he had stopped wanting to run the model. It was not a decision he could locate in time. 6 cycles, she said to the room, and she had blood on her shoulder and smoke on her face, and her voice was the most stable thing in the room. "We just have to be annoying for 6 cycles." Someone laughed. A human. Then 2 Savari, which was his species, did not laugh. Not the way humans did, but the sound they made was something adjacent, a tension-release vocalization that had no tactical purpose, and then the laugh was moving through the room like a thing with its own momentum. He did not understand why it helped. He noted, with his wrist sensor still on his arm and the anomaly compound still reading, that it did. The plan Hedgerika proposed was either genius or suicide, and Veth had run the probability models 3 times before accepting that the distinction no longer mattered to him. She had laid it out to him first, not to the room. To him, specifically, standing outside the sealed shaft where the Vrethian prisoner still lived, still breathing, the canteen of water she had left now empty and replaced by a second one Veth had brought without deciding to bring it. "He's been alone down here for 2 cycles, she said. "He's hurt, and he's scared, and he's 17 years old. Yes, I asked, yes, he answered, and the fleet up there thinks he's dead. Which means the fleet commander is running a grief response, not a pure strategic calculus. He lost his soldier. That changes things." Veth said, "You spoke to him." "Yes." "In what language?" "His." "Sort of. His wounding is in the front left quadrant. Vrethian carapace anatomy. The front left joint corresponds to the secondary heart chamber. Front left wounds have a specific behavioral signature in their species. The wounding protocols are in a medical database if you know how to look." She paused. "He taught me 4 words. The rest I inferred. He processed this. You learned a wounded enemy's language from biometric data." "I learned 4 words," she said. "Don't oversell it." She opened the shaft. She sat down beside the Vrethian. Veth stood at the opening and watched her explain in halting, improvised cross-language communication, using her body, using her sensor readout turned toward him as a visual aid, using those 4 words and everything around them, what she was going to do, what she needed from him. The Vrethian listened. His carapace, which had been closed since Veth last check, opened incrementally. By the time she finished, it was fully open, the Vrethian display of considered trust, not automatic trust, the kind given after evaluation. He had seen it in diplomatic contexts. He had never seen it given to a member of an enemy military. The Vrethian transmitted. What he transmitted was his voice, alive, and his location, and 7 words in Vrethian that Veth translation matrix rendered as, "She put the water down and waited." The fleet did not respond for 40 seconds. Veth counted them. His spines were fully erect, and his anomaly compound was at its highest reading, and the tactical center was behind him with 17 enemy dreadnoughts on the far side of the viewport, and he was standing in a maintenance corridor counting seconds while a human woman with a shoulder wound and a patched kit bag waited to see if an enemy fleet commander would choose something other than war. The response came. Not weapons fire. A channel open. Voice. Ehedrika transmitted back. She did not transmit demands. She transmitted the field dressing data. Every procedure she had used on the Scout, documented, translated into Vrethian medical notation by the station's translation AI in the 20 minutes she had spent preparing for this while VethKL was running his third probability model. She transmitted the data as a gift. Unrestricted. Non conditional. And then she said through the translation channel, Asterisk, your soldier is alive and treated. I am returning him. I am asking for ceasefire. Here is what I know about treating your wounded. It is not a trade. It is just what I know. Asterisk, the fleet held position for 6 minutes. VethKL had never experienced 6 minutes the way he experienced those 6 minutes. Savari time perception was precise and hierarchical. He measured his life in documented cycles and logged assessments and accurately time-stamped reports. He had no framework for 6 minutes that felt like they were happening outside of time, in some space where the rules of cause and effect were under renegotiation. The fleet withdrew. Not fully, a rear guard held at distance, which was standard Vrethian ceasefire protocol, the declaration that this was a pause rather than a peace. But the dreadnoughts pulled back out of strike range, and the fleet commander transmitted a single word that the translation matrix rendered as acknowledged. Then the relief commander arrived. She came in on the early edge of the 6-cycle window, a Savari admiral named Voreth who had served 30 years in the defense cooperative and whose spines were in the permanent high-angle position of someone who had made enough decisions that they no longer needed to recalibrate. She assessed the station. She assessed the damage report. She assessed Ehedrika, standing in the tactical center with a bandaged shoulder and the scout sensor data in her hands. You conducted unauthorized prisoner management, Voreth said. You disobeyed direct orders on 3 separate logged occasions. You shared military medical intelligence with a hostile party without command sanction. She looked at the withdrawal data on the tactical display. And you negotiated a ceasefire with a Vrethian siege fleet using a wounded child as an intermediary. Yes, Ehedrika said. I am opening a formal inquiry. VethKL said, no. He had not planned to say it. He had been standing to the left and 1 step back his standard witness position, and the words came out before his threat assessment could evaluate them, and he found, examining the output, that he would not have stopped them if he could. Voreth turned her full attention to him. 30 years of attention. The weight of it was considerable. She saved this station, he said. She saved it without a single additional casualty beyond those lost in the initial strike. She saved it by doing things that our regulations do not have a classification for, because our regulations do not imagine them as possibilities. He looked at Ehedrika. She was watching him with an expression he had not seen before on her face. Not the smile, not the focused calm. Something quieter and less armored. File an inquiry if you must. I will submit my testimony first. Voreth looked at him for a long time. Her spines did not move. She said, you were the assigned monitor for this unit. Yes. What is your threat assessment? He looked at Ehedrika. She had sat down on the deck while he was talking, because her legs had made the decision before she had. She was leaning against the wall under the tactical display, and her hands were resting in her lap, and her left hand was faintly trembling, barely visible, the kind of tremor that came after sustained adrenaline response in a mammalian cardiovascular system, the body's bookkeeping catching up with what the mind had spent. She looked at the relief fleet outside, and then at the Vrethian scout who was being transferred to medical under her written instructions for his care. And then she laughed. Not a victory laugh. Not the kind from the stories where someone wins a battle and laughs because they have won. This was a tired laugh, the kind that came out when something was over and the body needed to release what it had been holding, and the only valve available was laughter. It sounded like relief. It sounded like a person who had been very, very frightened and was only just admitting it now that the frightening thing was gone. Okay, she said. That was a lot. Her left hand was still trembling. VethKL watched it. He watched it for a long time. The recycled air hummed. Through the viewport, the Vrithian rearguard held its distance, and the stars were very old and very still, and the station breathed around him the way stations do, low and mechanical and continuous. He said to Vorith, very quietly, "Unknown threat classification. Open assessment. And then, I recommend we update the database." Later, when the immediate business of casualty reports and structural assessments and fleet coordination had consumed most of the remaining duty cycle, Vethkael returned to his terminal. He opened the incident file he had started at hour 1. Ehedrika, Incident 1, it was by this point quite long. He read it from the beginning, which he did not usually do. Savari procedure was forward sequential, the current field, not the prior record, and found that it read less like an incident log and more like something else, some other genre his professional vocabulary did not contain. He opened the formal assessment form for the Threat Classification Registry. He located the field for a primary behavioral category and placed his cursor in it and sat there. The Savari classification system had 47 primary categories. He had memorized them at age 9. He had applied them across 214 assessments in 17 years of service and had never left the field blank. He typed 3 characters, deleted them, typed different ones. The form was very patient. He thought about the sublevel door, the ration bar, the water canteen, the Vrithian with his carapace open, her hands in her lap, and the tremor in her left hand, and the laugh that was not a victory. He thought about Savari doctrine and Thesavor and Velthran and the 17 words his species had for the rational acceptance of correct losses and the absence, which he was aware of now in a way he had not been before, in the way you become aware of a missing tooth after you have stopped expecting the tooth to be there, of any word for any of the things she had done. He left the field blank. He saved the file. Outside, the Vrithian rearguard was still holding a distance, not retreating further, not advancing, waiting, perhaps, to see what kind of place this was, what kind of species lived here. Vethkael saved the file and did not find, for the first time in his career, that an empty field troubled him. The form did not require completion to be true. The form was fine. He was fine. He sat with that, the novel quality of it, for several minutes before his next report was due. A deep space frontier garrison station, Station Kethdora, seen from outside in the void, an angular utilitarian structure of gray hull plating and amber running lights, docked against a sparse star field, one docking collar illuminated by white dock bay lighting. The station looks functional, weathered, industrial. No warships nearby yet. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. A docking bay interior with harsh white overhead lighting, scuffed metal deck plating, and the rear hatch of a transit pod just sealed behind a departing form. A tall alien figure, the Savari Vethkael, stands in the foreground. A slender being with a row of translucent crystalline spines running from crown to mid-back, currently angled in a neutral position, refracting the dock lights into pale, prismatic lines across the floor. His skin is smooth gray-violet, his eyes large and amber-irised. He holds a data tablet. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. A human woman, Ehedrika, walks out of the docking bay transit pod toward Vethkael, a compact, dark-skinned woman in her late 20s. Wearing a worn military jacket with a yellow strip of repair tape across the left shoulder of her kit bag, her expression easy and open with a slight smile. She carries herself like she owns the room. The Savari alien with crystalline spines stands still, evaluating. The bay is otherwise empty. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Close-up detail shot. Ehedrika's kit bag shoulder strap, showing the yellow strip of repair tape applied at an angle. Clearly atmospheric suit repair tape, bright yellow against the worn gray-green bag fabric, edges slightly frayed. 6 fraying threads visible at the corner edge. The image has a shallow depth of field, bag strap in sharp focus. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Ehedrika extends her hand in the human greeting gesture toward Vethkel, who stands still with his hands at his sides. Her expression is pleasant, undefended. His crystalline spines are in a neutral assessment position. The docking bay lighting catches the prismatic scatter of his spines. Neither awkward nor hostile, just different. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. A garrison station corridor lit by cool white overhead panels. Alarm indicators at the far end just beginning to blink amber. Two Savuri garrison soldiers, tall gray-violet beings in black combat armor, crystalline spines fully erect and angled back in the threat display posture of their species, indicating neurological freeze, stand motionless in front of a sublevel door marked with a red pressure differential light. The corridor is otherwise empty. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Ihedrika sprinting down the station corridor toward the frozen Savari soldiers, her kit bag over one shoulder, no armor, moving at full speed with her hands already reaching forward. Her expression is focused, reading the scene, calculating. The red breach indicator on the sublevel door pulses behind the frozen soldiers. The corridor's ceiling lighting streaks above her as she runs. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Ihedrika pressed against the sublevel door frame, using her body as a brace anchor while working the manual seal lever with both hands, her face lit from below by the red breach indicator light. Her jacket is darkened at the side where the frame edge has caught her. One Savari soldier has moved to the position she indicated, crouched at the secondary brace point, his crystalline spines still elevated, hands braced against the wall. The door strains. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. The sublevel door breach indicator cycling from red through amber to dark. The seal completed. Ihedrika standing back, checking the readout on the panel. Her expression is the look of someone confirming a calculation, not celebrating a victory. The second Savari soldier is now in position at the brace. The corridor is stable. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Vethkel standing alone in the corridor 30 meters back, crystalline spines elevated slightly, staring down the corridor at Ihedrika's retreating figure with her yellow-taped kit bag. His wrist bears a thin chemical sensor band. The anomaly reading light on the sensor band glows faintly blue. The corridor is empty except for him. He has not moved. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Close detail shot. Vethkel's data terminal screen showing a new incident file. Subject field reads Ihedrika. Incident 1. Classification field reads irrational aggression. The file marked as open. The cursor blinks in the classification field. The rest of the screen shows the station schematic in the background. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Auxiliary Quarters 9 on Station Kithura. A small, bunk-lined room with standard-issue gray padding and a wall-mounted comm relay panel pulled partially open, its interior circuit board exposed. Ihedrika sits cross-legged on the floor beside the open relay, a foil ration packet in one hand, 9 leads of colored wiring on the floor around her. She is singing to herself, expression easy, completely at home in a room she arrived in 6 hours ago. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Close-up of Ihedrika's foil ration packet, labeled in multi-species text as a Pyri travel ration, open and partially eaten. The smell is implied by the slight haze visible at the packet's opening edge. The foil is printed in orange and red. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Vethkel, standing inside the auxiliary quarters doorway, door just closed behind him, expression unreadable. Large amber eyes focused on the capsaicin ration packet Ihedrika is holding toward him. His crystalline spines are in the neutral to alert range. The small room around them is functional and slightly cramped. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. The interior of the comm relay panel pulled open on the wall. A circuit board with 9 reconnected color-coded leads, The work clean and unconventional, routing through a backup board in a way that bypasses a clearly fried secondary component. Ehedrika's hands are at the edges of the frame, tools in both. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. A young Savari garrison private sitting on a bunk in the auxiliary quarters, his left forearm bandaged with the wrong pressure wrap. The standard issue wrapping tight in a way that causes subtle pain, his crystalline spines in the half-elevated pattern indicating suppressed discomfort. His eyes are forward, expressionless, the Savari non-display of pain. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Ehedrika kneeling beside the young Savari private, carefully unwrapping his forearm bandage and beginning to rewrap it using a different technique. The modified pressure wrap used in Savari field medicine, her hands precise and unhurried. The private watches her with large amber eyes. His spines are beginning to lower from the discomfort-elevated position. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Close detail. Ehedrika's hands applying the correctly modified pressure bandage to his Savari forearm. The wrapping technique is subtly different from standard, adjusted for the subdermal spine muscle anatomy visible as slight raised lines beneath the skin. Her hands are steady and practiced. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. The young Savari private's crystalline spines fully lowered to the neutral position, the pain release indication, as the correct bandage takes effect. He looks at Ehedrika and says better in standard. His expression is still composed, but the spine position tells the truth. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Ehedrika turning from the private and holding a standard issue ration bar out toward Vethkael, who stands near the door. She is not looking at his sensor readings or his spines. She is simply looking at him directly with the same steady attention she gave the relay and the private. His spines are slightly lowered. The bar is extended, waiting. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Vethkael, eating the ration bar, standing near the door of the quarters, his large amber eyes slightly unfocused. Not looking at Ehedrika, not looking at anything in particular. He holds the remaining half of the bar. Ehedrika is back at the relay in the background, singing again. The room hums with station background noise. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Close detail. Vethkael's hand holding the empty ration bar wrapper, slightly creased for being held. He has not put it down. The wrapper's logo is visible, standard multi-species garrison supply marking. His sensor band on the wrist shows a faint anomaly reading. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. A view through a station viewport into the star field. The void, still and immense. No ships visible yet. The viewport glass has a slight scratch pattern in the lower corner. The station corridor reflected in the glass shows empty space and distant running lights. A waiting image. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Ehedrika moving through a sub-level maintenance corridor carrying a portable life sign sensor, methodically checking each section. The corridor is narrow, low-ceilinged, lit by amber maintenance strips. She is focused on the sensor readout, not the regulation she is breaking. The corridor branches ahead of her. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Vethkael catching up to Ehedrika in the sub-level corridor, his expression carrying the particular Savari composure that masks high alert. His spines are in a mild elevated position. He is clearly trying to inform her of a regulation. She is clearly continuing to walk and scan. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. The access panel to maintenance shaft 7C. Unmarked, flush with the sub-level corridor wall, distinguishable from the surrounding surface only by the faint seam line of the panel edge. Ehedrika's portable sensor is pointed at it. The life sign reading on the sensor screen shows a small, faint, cold signature. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Ihedrika opening the maintenance shaft 7C access panel, revealing the dark interior of the shaft. The panel swings out toward the viewer. Within the shaft, deep in the shadow, a faint shape is visible, small, curled. The Vrithian scout in his defensive posture, limbs drawn in, secondary carapace folded over vitals. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. The Vrithian scout in the maintenance shaft, a young alien, roughly a quarter of standard Vrithian adult mass. His species body structure arthropoid with a secondary protective carapace, 6 limbs, and compound eye clusters currently shut. His coloring is pale brown-green, modeled for camouflage. A wound along his left flank shows dried, dark hemolymph matted into the carapace joint seams. He is curled in a mortal threat posture. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Ihedrika, inside the maintenance shaft, crouched low and moving in an oblique angle toward the wounded Vrithian scout, her hands visible and open, not approaching directly. The shaft is small and lit only by the light coming from the open panel. The Vrithian's carapace is opening, defensive threat posture, one forelimb beginning to extend. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. The Vrithian's forelimb snapping out in a warning bite toward Ihedrika's hand inside the maintenance shaft. The mandibles visible at medium extension, the motion frozen at the moment of contact with the back of her hand. Her hand is visible in the frame, the break in the skin beginning. Her expression off-screen. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Ihedrika completely still inside the shaft after the warning bite. Hands in her lap, not retreating, watching the Vrithian with calm attention. The Vrithian holds the bite reflex posture, mandibles at half extension, waiting. The shaft is very small. Neither of them moves. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Ihedrika resuming the field dressing of the Vrithian's flank wound inside the maintenance shaft, her hands working steadily on the carapace joint injury. The Vrithian's mandibles are at half extension, monitoring. Her right hand shows the small bite wound, bleeding slightly into the field dressing material, her blood mixing with his hemolymph. Her expression is focused and unhurried. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Close detail, Ihedrika's hands applying medical field dressing to the Vrithian scout's flank wound, where the carapace joint meets the softer tissue beneath. The dressing is being pressed into place firmly. The Vrithian's carapace is partially open now, a marginal lowering from threat closed towards something less absolute. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Ihedrika setting her water canteen beside the Vrithian scout inside the maintenance shaft, the canteen placed within his reach, its left grip dent visible on the side. She is in the oblique retreat posture, moving away from the Vrithian slowly and without direct eye contact. Her expression is clear and quiet. The Vrithian watches. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Close detail, the water canteen with a dent on its side, left grip shaped, resting on the maintenance shaft floor beside the Vrithian scout's nearest limb. The shaft floor has the fine grit of a space station maintenance corridor. The canteen looks very ordinary in this context. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Vethkel, standing at the open maintenance shaft panel in the sublevel corridor, staring into the shaft at the Vrithian scout who is now alive and, less afraid, the portable sensor in his hand showing the faint life sign signature. The shaft is visible behind the panel. The canteen in place, the dressing applied. His crystalline spines are at full erect, the danger response position. His expression is the careful, Savari composure of someone whose understanding of something has changed. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Vethkel closing the maintenance shaft panel without sealing it, his hand on the panel edge, pressing it flush with the corridor wall. The corridor is empty. The amber maintenance lighting is the only source of illumination. He is alone with a regulation he has just broken. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Station Kefdora Tactical Center. A circular operations room with holographic tactical displays and multi-species crew consoles. The displays currently showing early alert yellow for the station's outer sensor grid. Commander Aussie, a Savari in full command markings, stands at the central console. The room is functional and slightly tense, the pre-strike quiet. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. External shot of Station Kefdora. The Vrithian siege fleet approaching in the distance. 17 large vessels in dreadnought configuration, darker than the stars behind them, arranged in a precise approach formation. The fleet is still far enough to appear as shapes rather than details. The station's amber running lights are visible in the foreground. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. The tactical center of Station Kefdora mid-explosion. The ceiling of the commander station breached from above, a directed blast tearing through the console area, debris and fire expanding outward. Commander Aussie's position at the central console is at the center of the destruction. Emergency red lighting floods the room. The holographic displays shatter into static. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. The aftermath of the tactical center explosion. A room transformed into red-lit wreckage. Smoke thick at ceiling level. Collapsed conduit across a console. An active power coupling sparking at the contact point. Lieutenant, when visible, a human officer in garrison uniform, pinned under the conduit, alive and conscious. 6 or 7 garrison beings stand around the conduit without moving, staring at the sparking coupling. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Close detail. A sparking active power coupling with a collapsed conduit crosses a wall console. White-blue sparks continuous, the contact point glowing. The conduit is large, metal, clearly heavy. The coupling wiring is exposed. The danger of touching the conduit without insulation is visually clear. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Ehejurika's kit bag exterior showing the orange-striped insulation gloves hanging from the outer strap, clearly added recently, hanging loose at the strap where they were clipped. The gloves have the distinctive orange and gray pattern of high-voltage insulation equipment. The yellow repair tape is visible on the shoulder strap beside them. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Ehejurika at the collapsed conduit in the red-lit tactical center. Insulation gloves on her hands, braced to pull, her face turned back toward Lieutenant when pinned beneath it. She is speaking to him, keeping him conscious. The active coupling sparks beside her. Her body position shows the controlled, leveraged grip of someone who knows exactly how to move weight. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Ehejurika pulling the conduit free in one controlled motion. Her arms extended in the pull, the conduit beginning to lift away from Wen's legs. Sparks cascade from the power coupling. 3 garrison soldiers step forward to receive the lifted conduit. Wen's face shows the tension release of weight being removed. The red emergency lighting makes everything sharp and vivid. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Lieutenant, when pulled free from under the conduit, sitting upright with help, bleeding from both legs but alive. 3 garrison beings steady him. The tactical center is still smoking and red-lit around them. Ehejurika is stepping back, already looking toward the viewport. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. The tactical center viewport, or what remains of it after the blast, cracked but intact, showing the Vrithian siege fleet in full close approach formation. 17 dreadnought-class vessels visible now in detail. Dark angular hulls. Hull-mounted energy weapon arrays glowing amber green. The fleet arranged in the textbook siege configuration of converging strike vectors. Overwhelming. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Vethkael's point of view. Running his internal threat assessment, the Savari tactical probability display visible in his visual field as a translucent overlay. Red probability reading at the threshold of the model's operational floor. The fleet is on the other side of the viewport. His own reflection in the cracked glass is visible, spines at full erect. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Ihedrika, standing at the front of the damaged tactical center, facing the surviving garrison. 22 beings of 8 species, all looking at her. She is smoke-streaked, a darkening bloodstain at her shoulder seam, the yellow-taped kit bag nearby. She is not performing authority. She is simply at the front of the room, looking at the fleet. Her voice carries without volume. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Volkov, a broad-shouldered human in Garrison's specialist kit. Older, stubble-jawed, work-hardened, taking his position at the weapons console in the damaged tactical center and beginning to run the asymmetric fire pattern programs. His expression is that of a specialist doing a job. Red emergency lighting overhead. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Devi, a small human woman in station crew uniform, young, quick-moving, disappearing through a side corridor toward the atmospheric systems panel, already thinking. She has the focused look of someone running calculations while their body moves to the task. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Close detail. The bloodstains spreading under Ihedrika's pauldron at the shoulder seam. Dark and expanding, the jacket fabric darker than the surrounding material. Above it, unchanged, the yellow repair tape patch is still adhered to the pauldron. The 6th fraying thread is visible. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Ihedrika giving orders, pointing 2 different garrison members toward 2 different stations. Her voice level, her shoulder wound visible, her expression carrying the specific quality of someone who has decided that the situation is a logistical problem and is solving it. The garrison around her is in motion. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Veth KL at the garrison comm station in the damaged tactical center, seated, running the communication burst to the relief fleet's estimated position, the comm display showing outgoing signal trajectory. His expression is concentrated. His spines are slightly elevated. He is doing his job. He is also not having run the probability model. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. The garrison tactical center in red-lit wartime mode. Multiple crew at stations. Volkov running asymmetric fire programs on one side. Vethkel at comms on the other. Other garrison beings at various functions. The viewport beyond shows the siege fleet holding at approach range. The station's shield status display reads 30%. Everyone is working. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Ihedrika saying 6 cycles. We just have to be annoying for 6 cycles. Her posture open, her expression carrying the specific human quality of finding something genuinely, darkly funny in the situation. One human garrison member in the foreground has turned with a surprised laugh beginning. The red lighting softens the scene slightly. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. The laugh moving through the garrison. A human crew member fully laughing now. A Savari garrison soldier making the tension release vocalization adjacent to laughter. Another being covering their reaction with professional composure that isn't quite holding. Ihedrika's expression in the background is the quiet satisfaction of someone who gave the room what it needed without explaining why. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Vethkel watching the laughter move through the garrison. His expression that of an observer of something he cannot fully classify. His spine's at slightly below alert position. His wrist sensor glows with the anomaly compound reading. He does not know why it helps. He is noting that it does. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Ihedrika and Vethkel standing outside the sealed maintenance shaft 7C. She is laying out her plan quietly, her voice low. He is listening. The corridor is empty and lit by amber maintenance strips. Between them is the implicit weight of everything that has happened, and the fact that she is about to ask him to help her break 12 regulations. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Ehedrika opening the maintenance shaft panel again, both hands on the panel edge, pulling it open with the ease of a second visit. The interior of the shaft is visible, the Vrithian scout inside. A second water canteen is visible on the shaft floor, the first one empty, a full replacement having appeared without ceremony. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. The Vrithian scout in the maintenance shaft, same young alien as before, but the dressing on his flank is intact and clean. His carapace is still closed, but the posture has changed slightly. He is not in the full mortal threat configuration. He is watching Ehedrika enter the shaft with compound eye clusters open, tracking. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Ehedrika sitting beside the Vrithian scout in the shaft, her sensor readout turned toward him as a visual aid, communicating through a combination of gesture, the readout display, and for Vrithian words spoken carefully. The Vrithian is watching her sensor display. His carapace is beginning to open, the very beginning of considered trust. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Close detail. The Vrithian scout's compound eye clusters, 6 amber gold faceted eyes arranged in 2 sets of 3 on either side of his head, currently open and focused forward. They reflect the shaft's dim light in multiple overlapping patterns. They are looking at Ehedrika. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. The Vrithian scout's carapace fully open, showing the considered trust posture, the secondary protective shell folded back to reveal the softer material beneath. He is looking at Ehedrika directly. This posture has meaning. It is not given to enemies. His expression, insofar as an arthropoid carapace face can express, is something close to careful consideration. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Vethkael watching from the open panel as Ehedrika communicates with a Vrithian scout inside the shaft. The Vrithian's carapace open, his posture changed. Vethkael's crystalline spines are at full erect. His wrist sensor glows bright with the anomaly reading. He is very still. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. The Vrithian scout transmitting a communication from inside the maintenance shaft, his vocal apparatus active, the sound of his own voice alive. The transmission is going out on a channel Ehedrika has opened on a portable comm unit sitting in the shaft. The scout's compound eyes are steady. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Vethkael's expression during the 40 seconds of silence after the Vrithian transmission. His spines fully erect, his amber eyes watching the comm unit, counting seconds. The maintenance corridor is absolutely still around him. The comm unit's transmission indicator light glows steady green. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Close detail. A countdown timer on a display, 40 seconds. 30, 20. The numbers changing. The display is portable, sitting in the maintenance corridor, its screen the only bright light. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. The Vrithian fleet tactical display on the damaged station tactical center. All 17 dreadnoughts holding at approach range, not advancing, not retreating. A communications channel indicator blinks, open. The fleet commander has responded. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Ehedrika transmitting the medical field dressing data to the Vrithian fleet via the station's translation AI, seated at the comm station. The transmission data visible on the display. Vrithian medical notation, the carapace joint dressing procedure, anatomical diagrams. She is reading the transmission confirmation. Her expression is quiet and certain. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. The tactical display showing the Vrithian siege fleet beginning to pull back, dreadnoughts adjusting vector away from the station, the approach formation dissolving into a withdrawal configuration. 12 of 17 vessels pulling to distance. The tactical display's threat overlay shifts from full red to yellow amber as the fleet moves out of strike range. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Close detail. The Vrithian fleet communication display. A single translated word. Acknowledged. The letters on the screen in the dim tactical center. Nothing more. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. 5 of the Vrithian dreadnoughts holding a distance in rearguard formation. Not retreating further, not advancing. Their angular dark hulls are visible through the tactical center viewport. A ceasefire is not a peace. They are waiting. The station is waiting too. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Admiral Voritha's relief fleet arriving. Additional Savari defense cooperative vessels visible through the viewport, entering from the opposite vector of the Vrithian rearguard. The lead vessel is larger than the garrison vessels, a command-class cruiser with distinctive Savari design. Smooth, curved hull sections alternating with crystalline sensor arrays. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Admiral Vorith standing in the damaged tactical center. A Savari admiral in full command markings, her crystalline spines in the permanent high-angle position of long authority, her large amber eyes assessing the room. She is taller than Vethkael, older, with the settled posture of someone who has made 30 years of difficult decisions. She is looking at a Hedgerika. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. A Hedgerika facing Admiral Vorith, standing straight despite the bandaged shoulder, the scout's sensor data in her hands, making no effort to minimize what she has done. The tactical center is damaged and red-lit and still smelling of smoke around them. Vorith is listing the violations. A Hedgerika's expression is not defiant. It is just honest. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Vethkael stepping forward from his witness position beside the tactical console, one step ahead of his position. His spines are in the full elevated alert position, not threat, but emphasis. He is speaking to Admiral Vorith, who has turned her 30 years of authority toward him. He is holding her gaze. He did not plan this. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Vethkael speaking to Admiral Vorith in the damaged tactical center. The surviving garrison visible in the background watching this moment. A Hedgerika watching from the side with a quieter expression. Vorith's spines are steady. Vethkael's are elevated. Between them, the question of what the regulation manual does with things it has no category for. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. A Hedgerika sitting down on the deck of the tactical center, her back against the wall below the main display. She sits because her legs have decided before her mind. Her hands are in her lap. The wounded shoulder is visibly bandaged now. The yellow-taped kit bag rests against the wall beside her. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. The Vrithian scout being transferred to the station medical bay under the care of 2 garrison medics. His carapace is fully closed again, but his posture is not the mortal threat configuration. He is cooperating with the transfer. In his forelimb, he is holding something. The empty first water canteen, the one with the left grip dent, which a Hedgerika left in the shaft. He has kept it. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. A Hedgerika on the deck leaning against the wall, her hands in her lap, her left hand faintly trembling, the post-adrenaline tremor of a mammalian cardiovascular system, small and involuntary and honest. She is looking at the viewport where the Vrithian rearguard holds its distance. And she laughs. Not a victory laugh. A tired, relieved, genuine human laugh. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Vethkael watching a Hedgerika's hands from across the room, his amber eyes steady on the tremor in her left hand. He is not looking at the fleet. He is not looking at Admiral Vorith. He is watching her left hand. The recycled air moves through the room. The station hums. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Close detail. Ehedrika's hands resting in her lap, both hands visible, the left one showing the fine tremor. The right hand has the bite wound from the Vrithian scout, now dressed. Her hands look like the hands of someone who has done a great deal with them over many years. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. VethKL alone at his terminal in the station intelligence office. A compact room with a single console, sparse, and ordered as the Savari prefer. The incident file is open on his screen, now many pages long. He is reading from the beginning. His posture is that of someone who has not read their own words from the start before, and is finding they have written something other than a report. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Close detail. The formal threat classification registry form on VethKL's terminal. The field for primary behavioral category shows the cursor blinking in an empty field. The 47 classification options are visible in a drop-down to the right, all of them inadequate. The cursor blinks. The screen waits. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. VethKL's hand on his terminal keyboard. Not typing. Suspended over the keys, the cursor still blinking in the empty classification field. His crystalline spines are at the lowest position he has held them all day. The office is quiet. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. The incident file on VethKL's screen, the final state. Incident report saved, classification field blank, file marked as complete. The file name reads Ehedrika, Incident 1. The blank field glows white and empty where a category should be. He has saved it anyway. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. The station viewport from inside the intelligence office, showing the Vrithian rearguard at distance. Holding position in the star field, 5 angular dark vessels neither advancing nor retreating. Waiting to see what kind of place this is. The stars behind them are old and still. The station's reflection is faint in the viewport glass. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting. Final image, Station Kith'Dora exterior at distance in deep space. The Vrithian rearguard visible as small dark shapes far off. The Savari relief fleet visible as bright shapes nearer in. Between the two fleets, the station, lit by its amber running lights, functioning, intact. Smaller than both fleets. Still there. Cinematic sci-fi illustration, dramatic lighting, deep space setting.